into 2020. Okay, I'm live on StreamYard. So let me start it over real quick. Welcome back to the Semi Thoughts podcast. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. Again, man, we've crossed over into another year. God allowed us to wake up this morning, allowed us to, survive all the trials and tribulations that occurred on last year, and now we back. And that's definitely something to be grateful for. So, again, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for continuing to patronize the podcast. I'm going to grow this thing this year. My motto for 2023 is exhaust yourself. So, I'm going to make sure that I use all of my talents, everything that God gave me, in order for me to just be a better person overall, but just make sure that I show more of myself. I feel like I have a tendency to sleep on myself at times, and 2023 will not be that year that I will continue to sleep on myself and not exhaust my talents and use every gift that God gave me to be successful in this life. So I'm here, man. So look, I'm just thankful to see another year, thankful to be here with y'all again. Again, if you want to continue to know what the Semi Thoughts podcast is going on with, or what's going on with the Semi Thoughts podcast, let me say, you can follow me on all social media platforms. If you see the ticker below, for those of you who will be listening to this on Apple Podcasts and any other streaming platform, my social media is Sip My Thoughts. You can follow me on Instagram. Same thing. I also have a podcast page on Instagram, which is the Sip My Thoughts Pod. So definitely tap in with me, and I'm gonna be doing more of these. I'm definitely gonna be going live more. I'm trying to build like a not a fan base, but like a subscriber base. Like I want to get more in tune and more in contact with you all. I definitely want to have a lot of meaningful dialogue and more conversations that I have not been having. And yeah, I'm just looking to grow this year in all facets of my life. So this is another way and another platform in which I am definitely going to continue to, exhaust myself and make sure that I'm more present in the things that I need to be doing and the things that I want to do. So I'm back, man. So just to start off today's topic, the title of this episode is going to be HBCUs Forever. And if you have seen Wakanda Forever, which came out in November, I believe, this pretty much is the inspiration for this show. So I've been wanting to do this since the end of last year. Well, since I've seen the movie, but I never got around to doing it. So this episode is inspired by Wakanda Forever. So let me just give you a little background on where this episode is going to go. So I went to a historically black college and university, and unless you've been living under a rock the last 2 years, you will know that Deion Sanders, prime time, was the head football coach at Jackson State University. And over that time, and if you listen to one of the previous episodes I did, it was called the HBCU Renaissance. Basically, in that episode was what I was saying was that there have been certain periods in time in existence where certain movements came about, and it kind of shaped and shaped the course of history, no matter what that looked like, whether it was good or whether it was bad. I mean, obviously, you'll look at slavery, and you obviously know that there was a period of time in which, we were taken from where we were in Africa, and we were brought across the shores to America. Um, However, there were already a group of people here also, which were the indigenous people, which is something that definitely ties into Wakanda Forever, which is obviously the Black Panther movie. But just to go back to the Deion Sanders part, he was a coach at HBCU, historically black college or university, for maybe new listeners who might be here. So basically, these last 2.5 or 3 years, because you could say he was a coach for 3 years because we had the spring COVID season that he had. So he was a football coach at Jackson State for 3 years, you would say. So over that 3 years, you saw the energy, you saw the resurgence of HBCUs, you saw the renewed interest in HBCUs. You saw an energy that you probably haven't seen that I could really point to in HBCUs history. That might sound kind of far-fetched, but for those of us who knew about HBCUs, those of us who attended HBCUs, we knew what HBCUs were founded on. We knew what HBCUs meant and what they mean to our community. So that's not a big deal for those of us who have actually, went to these institutions and are fruit of these institutions. So that's not something that's new to us. But for prime time to start his head coaching career at a historically black college or university, he brought in some new eyes that have not been as tuned in with HBCUs as those of us, again, who have attended these institutions. So, a previous episode, I titled it HBCU Renaissance because this is a period where things could have really shaped and could have really turned out to be what any prominent movement this country has ever seen. That's what this could have been. Now we now know that Deion Sanders left Jackson State University and became the head football coach at the University of Colorado. So that renaissance, in some people's eyes, might have ended. But over that 3-year span, I felt like kids really got a chance to see what we, meaning our institutions, are, what they could be, if we just return to our institutions and to our communities, and instead of allowing those dollars to be made outside of our communities, those dollars could be made within our community. Obviously, I think people, when you look at slavery and you know about the history of slavery, I think people have this false sense of, I'm not really sure how to describe it, but slavery wasn't that long ago for black and brown people. And there's this whole thing about, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and things like that. But if you have a 300 or 400 or 500 plus year start on me, and I've only been free for like 60 something years, how am I going to pull myself up by my bootstraps? I'm an avid reader, so I like to pay attention to what's going on around me, what's going on in the country and things like that. There have been numerous articles that I've seen that have said that black people will never amass the amount of wealth in our lifetime that our white counterparts have amassed. And when you look at some of the businesses and the history of some of these companies, in the country, who the people who founded these businesses, they're not black. They might have they might have black people in these certain positions, or they might have brown people in these certain positions, as executives and managers and things like that. But we'll never be able to amass a certain amount of wealth for our community in order to even pull ourselves up, or by whatever the whole bootstrap analogy is. I mean, it's a terrible analogy, especially when you know the history and the economics. And HBCUs being underfunded, and resources being taken out of our communities and placed in other communities in order for these communities to thrive. So, that's just an argument that we will never win. And it quite frankly, I think it's an argument that we aren't even waging per se. Whenever we talk about injustice in this country, it's always combated by, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or why don't you just get out and work? And they completely negate or don't talk about the fact of cities being underfunded. For an example, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. Obviously, we've been dealing with a water crisis probably since, it dates back even before I was born. But when you talk about a water crisis, you're talking about a city, the capital city of the state of Mississippi, which has one of the largest black populations in the country, being underfunded. A bill was recently voted upon in order to bring solvency to the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi, which will basically redo the infrastructure. I believe $600 million was allocated for this specific issue, and I believe only two members of the House, which were, one was a Republican member from the state of Mississippi, and the other was a Democratic member of the state of Mississippi, voted in order to improve the infrastructure in the city of Jackson, which would then alleviate this water crisis. And then you had 4 Republican members, also from the state of Mississippi, who voted against it. So we keep trying to bring solvency to an issue where people are continuing to try to belittle and not provide these resources that the capital city where a majority black population lives, by the way. So when you talk about pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and things like that, we elect these people to do a job. So when they do not do their job, what do we do then? There's no reason to talking about a bootstraps argument when we can't even get our elected officials to do their job for all people. There are also white Americans who live in the state of Mississippi also. Not the state of Mississippi, but the city of Jackson, I mean, who are being affected by this water crisis as well. So when you're also voting against that, you're voting against your constituency as well. So why would you not want these resources for all people instead of just, a certain segment or a certain group of people? And when you look up these politicians, you'll actually see what I mean. But this isn't a political episode. But I really want to just touch on, the movement piece of this conversation. So let's talk about Wakanda Forever. So Wakanda Forever is basically about Wakanda, which is an all-black colony where the resources stay within that community. Now, the resources are available based on the last king, which was King T'Challa. Obviously, the father died in the original Black Panther, so King T'Challa, which was the son, was elevated. King T'Challa saw what his father was doing, how his father was leading, and obviously the father thought he was leading in the best way possible for him. But T'Challa didn't really see it that way. So T'Challa decided once he became king to wherever he saw fit, or wherever their government decided to see fit, they would have decided to help whoever they could help if that was something that they wanted to do. So when we talk about movements, keeping resources and things like that within our communities, I think Black Panther and Wakanda Forever is a very good example of all of that. So when we talk about movement, specifically Jackson State, for an example, right? They recently just lost the Celebration Bowl to North Carolina Central University, which is another historically black college university as well. So what the SWAC and the MEAC did was they created a bowl game between both conferences so that they could pretty much decide a black national champion. And when you think back to what Wakanda is, Wakanda is keeping resources within the community. So all resources, health, medical, food, government, all of that. That money is kept within. I'm just talking about money in a hypothetical sense because when you watch the movie, you don't see anything about money. But I'm just speaking when it comes to black movements and things like that as well. So the Celebration Bowl allows the two top teams from the SWAC and the MEAC, and they come together for the Celebration Bowl. Top team from the SWAC, top team from the MEAC. This year, that was, again, Jackson State University and North Carolina Central. So the payout for the winner, I believe, is like $1 million. It's $1 million. And I'm paraphrasing. I could be wrong, so don't quote me on this. But I believe the loser might go home with something as well. But I believe theirs is in the six-figure mark also. So if I'm wrong, someone will correct me on that, I'm sure. But again, this money stays within the community, meaning historically black colleges or universities. So that's just one symbolism of what Wakanda, how Wakanda and Wakanda Forever, well, Black Panther and Wakanda Forever ties into historically black colleges or universities. Now, at the end of the press conference, I also want to play this because this is a player on Jackson State who is an NFL prospect who made a pretty powerful statement at the end of his presser. And I kind of just want to play it. I wish I could bring it up on the screen. I'm not sure how I can do that. I'm still pretty much learning how to use StreamYard, but I can play it for you. You should be able to hear it in the background. So hold on really quickly for me. And here we go. So, and also a couple of days, well, a day later, he actually tweeted, "We got to break the system. The reason why it doesn't look like we have so much money is because we aren't installing ourselves in these programs. These programs he's referring to historically black colleges and or universities." He continues by saying, "We already cracked the system, had the Power Five shook. Let's take what's ours." Again, any movement in this country that has um, taken shape or taken form or has been something really prominent, it started by I believe you would say one person, but that one person is then supported by the many or the multitude. So when you look at the civil rights movement, a lot of people will just place Dr. Martin Luther King at the forefront of that movement, but Dr. King had allies: Stokely Carmichael, um, Reverend Jesse Jackson. Despite how you might feel about the Reverend Jesse Jackson, um, he had different allies that stepped in and helped him to do what he needed to do in order to continue to make the movement go. And what you also needed was prominent people from different walks of life, which is something that he also had as well as far as support and things like that were concerned. So if you look at Deion Sanders for an example, people might say that he will. Well, I don't think you can say people say. I think you can definitively say that Deion Sanders was at the forefront of the HBCU Renaissance, as I would like to call it. But a lot of people would also challenge that and say that HBCUs didn't need someone to just come in and just, speak, or, just specifically talk about what was going on at Jackson State. And I think what people would really like to say, or what people would really point to, is the fact that, okay, you come in and say that you want to be a catalyst for all HBCUs, but what does that look like? And I think that that's something, while he attempted to advocate for historically black colleges and universities, and he definitely did, but HBCUs were already pretty prominent. Now, I think it's disingenuous to look at HBCUs and not talk about the impact that Coach Prime Deion Sanders absolutely had on the landscape of the culture. He absolutely pushed the culture forward. That goes without saying. He definitely did that, and you cannot belittle or take that away from him. But now he's gone. So, what is next as far as the movement is concerned? Who is going to continue to uphold that mantle and keep pressing forward, keep making sure that things are what they should and could be, even though you're still facing the issues that HBCUs have? I don't think you can I don't think that you can overlook or deny what's been done thus far in order to take this movement forward. So, just relating back to Black Panther per se. Now Deion Sanders is gone. Who is going to continue to keep the movement pressing forward? And the good thing about him being there was that he brought the lights, he brought the cameras, he brought the exposure. But now he is gone. So now what must take place is a community and a general effort from everyone in the HBCU space to continue to keep these programs at their forefront and continue to place them where they should be. And one of the interesting things is we just actually had like early signing period. And I think what you see now, you see a lot more kids signing with HBCUs. And when you listen to them talk about HBCUs, like it really just makes me feel good. Obviously, being a proponent of HBCU, being a graduate of HBCU, but also having the PWI experience as well. Um, just seeing these kids be proud of wanting to sign with an HBCU, knowing the history and learning the history of the HBCU, and continuing to try to move this thing forward. Yeah, prime time is gone, but just because he's gone, that does not mean that this progress and this movement stops. Everything must continue to keep going, right? So you listen to, I just heard a young man talk about why he signed with Jackson State. And basically, he said he signed because he had the opportunity to follow Coach Prime to Colorado, but he didn't. He said he really wanted the HBCU experience. He wanted to come to an HBCU. So he signed with the HBCU and he did so. And he's eventually going to get that experience. So I think that's pretty cool. But I just really want to get back to the whole movement aspect. Again, when we're talking about movements, movements aren't just made up of one group of people. So when you're talking about Wakanda Forever, right? You're talking about an indigenous group of people, and you're talking about the kingdom of Wakanda. The kingdom of Wakanda is doing business, right? They're not doing business per se, but they are moving at the same pace in which they were moving, even though their king has died. Which means, and again, I'm gonna make this as literal as I possibly can. Any black movement that you've seen in this country, somehow or another, the leader always ends up getting killed. That always happens. That's just something that we can't not acknowledge or act like that does not happen. The leader of a movement always gets killed, right? But it's the people behind them, it's the kingdom. And again, I'm going back and forth between Wakanda Forever and this HBCU renaissance that we have going on at the moment. But once the leader dies, someone else has to take over, right? Someone else has to step in and make sure that their movement continues to go in the direction that it's supposed to go. So in comes, Prince Shuri, not Prince, Princess Shuri. So eventually, she is going to become the leader of Wakanda, which is basically what the movie is based on. Up until the point to where, you know, um, the queen dies, Queen Ramonda. It's up until she dies. But anyway, again, just speaking specifically to movement, someone else always comes in or comes along and they continue to move everything forward. Yeah, someone might die, someone might get sick along the way, but the movement must continue. So when you look at Wakanda Forever, yeah, Queen Ramonda died. King T'Challa died. But everything had to keep moving. And and I feel like this is a good place to insert a Nipsey analogy. One thing that Nipsey was very you all know that Nipsey was a member of the Rolling 60 Crips, right? And one of the things that Nipsey said, I vividly remember this on an interview that he did. Even though he was a member of the gang, he was an active member, but he was still from the neighborhood. But what Nipsey always said is in which the way that he carried himself, no one is bigger than the program. No one is bigger than the program. So it might happen to you. A leader or someone who is looked upon as a leader might get struck down. But again, no one is bigger than the program. The program has to continue to move. The movement has to continue in order for progress and to make things better for those coming behind. So when you talk about movements, and just pretty much trying to make things the best that they possibly can be after a leader in this situation, the leader moved on to what he felt was greener pastures. So now you have a people who have been, I guess I would say, disgruntled by the way that this leader exited. You can also look at the fact that the university that he moved on to, or the place that he moved on to, he walked in the door to tell us that he was here to provoke change. God called him here in order to make this change. Um, he wants to be a proponent of all HBCUs, but you eventually walk out the door and take an opportunity at a non-HBCU in a Power Five school. And I don't think people have an issue with, I mean, we've talked enough about this, but there's no issue with leaving. It's how you leave, right? So when you talk about, when you come in the door and you bring all this machismo as far as, touting what you want to do for HBCUs, this was a seminal moment in time to where the type of change that could have been made over a course of time, just based on the words that he spoke, really could have shifted and leveled the playing field. I really felt like the Power Five was afraid of what he could do at a historically black college and university. And to be honest, taking that job, it does not separate him. It just puts him amongst the pack. And I feel like you have those in movements who want to be leaders. They want to be the ones to help push things to the next level. They want to push the culture forward. They want to make things better for everyone that's coming behind them. And then you have those who simply want to exist, who simply wants to hold a position in the power structure and to keep things the way that they are. And you can always say that, you still want to affect the lives of young black boys and stuff like that at these institutions as well, which is true. I mean, that can't be denied as well. But when you know what HBCUs were built on, when you know why they were built, when you know the reason that HBCUs are in the current financial positions that some are in, then it's hard to just go online and say some of the stuff that you see being said and just think people are going to be okay with it just because you decided to elevate yourself. A lot of movements, you see people trying to self-elevate. And when you listen to the presser that he gave, well, not the presser, but when you listen to the conversation that he had with his team, he talked about in this life, you either get, basically, I'm paraphrasing, demoted or elevated, or basically fired and elevated, whatever, something along those lines. If you look at any movement that this country has seen, there's always been some type of dissension when it comes to elevating or even just remaining amongst the pack. If you remain amongst the pack or you ingratiate yourself in these spaces that do not benefit people who look like you, what type of change are you making essentially? You aren't really making a change at all. The only thing that's improving is your bank account. The culture isn't for sale. Never has and never will be. Going back to Black Panther, one of the most precious resource that Wakanda had was vibranium. One of the most precious resources that HBCUs have are black people. You had those, yes, in the original Black Panther, King T'Chaka's brother was attempting to sell vibranium outside of Wakanda, and the brother found out, and he eventually killed him for it. Did it have to get there? No, but when you really think about it, when it comes down to our community, we do similar things for health, wealth, really primarily more so wealth. We'll kill one another for something that we have instead of going out to work for it and do things the right way. And that's just the downfall of any movement, good and bad. Each movement has a good and a bad to it. That can't be negated. That can't be overlooked. So when you saw him when the king saw him trying to sell vibranium outside of Wakanda, he addressed him. The brother thought he was doing it for a noble cause, but the brother was actually doing it for money. That's what he was really doing it for. And Again, we can look at this situation and say, well, this person was worth 45 million. And I've already said his name, so you know who I'm referring to. This person is worth $45 million. But when it's there, when it's presented to you, when it's thrown in your face, when people see what you're doing for the culture, they're going to always come at you. They're going to always attack you, and not necessarily attack you in a physical way, but find ways in which they can appeal to whatever it is that excites you. We all have vices. We all have things that, that we would do stuff for that we probably shouldn't. And a person can be worth 45 million all they want, but when somebody comes along and offers you a 4-year contract or a 5-year contract that's going to pay you like 5 million a year plus incentives, you will go online and you'll say something about, well, it's about my staff. It's about me trying to put them in better positions. It's about me trying to make sure that they level up. And I feel like that's not, a part of me feels like some of the things that he say is absolutely disingenuous. But one of the things that you can't do, you can't frown on the fact of black men who have not attained a certain amount of wealth in their lives. You can't really frown upon them getting it, but it just depends upon the way in which they get it, if that makes sense. Everybody wants to be elevated in this life. We all want to. So that just goes without saying. But if you're into the Bible, right? The Bible tells you, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his entire soul? So when it comes to dealing with black and brown kids that look up to you as a cultural icon, as a cultural figure, again, even talking, I'm hoping that you all are noticing how I'm intertwining Black Panther and with this whole HBCU Renaissance movement at the moment. I gave you the example about the brother trying to sell vibranium and why he was doing it, what his motives were for doing that, right? The brother thought he was doing something noble. In the end, what the brother was actually doing was trying to enrich himself. If you look at this movement, this person was already enriched, but he would tell you that he was here for the upliftment of all. Now, that's just based on how you feel about that specifically. You would know if he did or he did not accomplish that. My thing, you can't say that you're here to uplift all HBCUs and you leave and after 3 years. You can't say that. You can't come to Mississippi, a city or a state in the Bible Belt, and say that God called you here and you present this big, huge dream to people and they bite, obviously, because if you're being from Mississippi myself, I know what it means to have someone or I wouldn't even call them an outsider, but to have someone come in and embrace your city, embrace everything that goes along with it, the good and the bad, right? But you leave and people feel like they were that they were sold a false bill of goods, right? So again, in talking and comparing Black Panther and Wakanda Forever to this movement, if you watch the movie, you see dissension among, the elders and the king and the entire royal court. Wakanda wants its resources in Wakanda, right? And then let's just fast forward to Wakanda Forever again. Just again, I'm steadily trying to make the comparison. Hopefully, I'm doing a good job of making you all see. Um, at the beginning of Wakanda Forever, you clearly saw when Queen Ramonda met with the council, right? You had a group of people, group of soldiers, or colonizers, as they would be referred to in the movie. They had a resource. That resource was vibranium. HBCUs had a resource. That resource was Deion Sanders. Wakanda Forever. The colonizers wanted the vibranium so bad, they thought that they would prey upon Wakanda. Why did they prey upon Wakanda? Because the king was dead. They thought that they can just come in and take that resource forcefully and not ask for it. They wanted to take it because of what of the benefit that it could provide. This particular institution, and another thing, I'm just going to interject this really quick. Another way, or why I say that some of his comments were disingenuous. I came across a YouTube video on 24/7 Sports, and there's a guy named Jeremy Bloom, who was I think he was a former Olympian from Colorado, and he played professional football. Jeremy Bloom in his video said that once Colorado fired their coach, which is around the time I believe Jackson State played Alabama State, he said he had a conversation with the athletic director about saying that they needed to go get Deion Sanders. I don't know what game the Alabama State game was, but I think that was the week before homecoming. So that was probably like week 6, which means that he had been talking to Colorado way before he led on, or way before he said that he was, which is him being disingenuous, because he stood in front of a group of people and said that I'd be a fool not to entertain it. But what he said was he would entertain it after the season. That's disingenuous. I've even seen and heard people say that they knew around Thanksgiving that he was leaving. So that means these conversations had already been progressing to the point to where there was legitimate interest, which came out in a report from a guy named Carl Reed, and then ESPN later backed that report up, and they sent out an alert about it as well. So there's a certain level of things that he say that comes off as disingenuous when you know that you have been doing this for quite some time. And again, the thing about YouTube is YouTube puts stuff in the algorithm that looks similar to some of the videos that you're watching consistently. And, that's just what it is. They put it in your face. So that's how I saw that video. He might not even know that video is out there, but I saw it. So he had been talking to them long before he led on. So just going back to the example that I gave before I interjected that point. Vibranium was a resource that colonizers wanted, and they did anything that they could in order to take that resource away from the Wakandans, or take them away from Wakanda, because I don't think Wakanda is what they call it is. But and pay attention also, Colorado saw a resource and decided that they were going to do anything possible to take that resource away from a community, a university, and an institution that needed that man to be where he was. He always likes to say that he likes to be where his feet is. That was something that he was really popular, and that was something that he really got into saying. That was really his thing. But it comes off as being a disingenuous because his feet were also somewhere else that he didn't lead on to, basically, if that makes sense. So his feet was somewhere else, even though he said that he liked for his feet to be where they are. He likes to dominate today. He might have done that. And I won't say that he might have. He did that. But his feet were also somewhere else as well. Any movement in this country that we've ever seen has always been interrupted by either the leader being killed, the leader being taken away. If you know anything about COINTELPRO, You have people that are planted inside of movements in order to just disintegrate the movement altogether and remove the leader from the movement. There are so many things and there are so many semblances in which Black Panther, Wakanda Forever ties into this HBCU movement and this HBCU renaissance. How do we keep the renaissance going, though? That's the question. First of all, I think we have to give a lot of credit to parents of these kids who are still deciding to attend HBCUs, despite the fact that that leader is no longer in place at Jackson State University. And the crazy thing is, and you might call me far-fetched or you might say that I'm reaching, but when you really look at the class that TC Taylor, the new head coach at Jackson State, when you really look at the class, the early signing period, and the type of guys that he's gotten to come and join his program with him, this team is going to be really talented next year. And I think there's something to be said about the way he's going about recruiting. He's not only just recruiting nationally, he's getting high school guys. That wasn't a lot of the formula of what the old coach did. He's really recruiting the state of Mississippi, which is really good because Mississippi is really a under recruited football state, I would say. Obviously, you got the guys in the state that's gonna go to Mississippi State, Ole Miss. might have some that decide to go to Southern Miss, but for the most part, a lot of our top guys leave the state and go to other programs outside of the state of Mississippi. TC Taylor is recruiting the best players in Mississippi. He's also hitting the transfer portal really hard. And he's also bringing some guys back. There might have been some guys that entered the transfer portal. Obviously, with a huge name like that, some of those guys are gonna go with him, and some of them did. I believe right now it's probably like up to like 7 or 8 guys, probably 2 more waiting to, pull the trigger on whatever they're waiting on as far as, wanting to go join him. But basically what I'm saying is the movement has to continue. So first of all, I think you got to point at the parents. There are parents who realize, I don't know, even when I was playing sports, my parents used to tell me, it don't matter where you go. If you're doing what you're supposed to do and you're excelling, they're going to come find you. And when you look at some of these kids that just signed to Jackson State, the 4-star kid that signed, he just talked about he really wanted the HBCU experience. He could have followed the previous coach, but he decided not to. And that's another thing about movements as well. Everyone isn't going to be aligned mentally, physically, and emotionally with what needs to be done. Everyone isn't going to move the same mentally. And you really can't expect everyone to move the same mentally. But for those who are really down for the cause, for those who really want to see people who look like them thrive, succeed, bring those resources back to the community in order to build the community. Again, there's no such thing as pulling yourself up by bootstraps. There's no such thing as pulling yourself up by bootstraps if you're attending a historically black college or university. Only thing you have to do is look at the underfunding. You can't outgive underfunding. Again, any movement in this country, you can tie these types of things to. There's jealousy, there's envy, there's someone wanting a bigger position. There's someone who feels like they're doing more and they need to be elevated. There's someone who just wants to stand out. They don't want to stand out amongst the crowd. We know that the Power Five in college football are the revenue. They're revenue generators. Huge. You want those jobs. Those coaches who have those jobs are coaches who want those jobs. If you really look at it, there aren't a lot of black coaches who hold jobs at these institutions as far as being the leader is concerned. So he took that job because he wanted to be the leader. But just imagine having the entire culture in the palm of your hand. Having the culture in the palm of your hand. The culture would have done anything in order to see you continue to uplift, to continue to raise you like a pantheon of great black head coaches. And most importantly, what I really feel like he missed out on as far as exiting this movement is the fact that the culture would have helped him to do anything he needed to do. All he had to do was ask. It's easy when you go somewhere where the money is and you just feel like that helps you do your job better, or that allows you to focus on simply being a coach. That's fine. That's fine. But if you want to keep talking to these kids about overcoming adversity, you were in the perfect place to do it. Be that example. Be that example for them. Another issue that I really had is the fact that, and again, these people are also embedded in movements as well. You have people who are the loudest, but aren't necessarily the smartest, that aren't necessarily the most intelligent, that aren't necessarily thinking before they're speaking, that are saying things. You're standing in front of a large group of people and saying things, and you have no idea what you're talking about. That doesn't help the movement. So in that sense, the movement isn't going to miss him because he's steadily putting out false equivalencies and false statements in order to try to justify his leaving the movement. You did what you did for the movement, and that could not be understated. It cannot be understated. But how beneficial are you to the movement if you're steadily making comments and statements that does not align with what is happening in the movement? You have these people embedded in movements. And you have the bullheaded people in movements as well. You have the people who look at Princess Shuri after Queen Ramonda was killed. She went out and she made an emotional decision, and she led some of her own people to death because of her emotions, because of not seeing things through, because of not thinking things out, because of not just thinking about what could happen instead of just rushing into something blindly. I feel like we rushed into this. Well, I won't even say rush. We were thrust into this movement. We were thrust into this movement without really knowing where we were going. I don't think we knew where we were going. We knew who was at the head of the movement, and we knew that he was the face of all faces as far as culture is concerned. He was the face of all faces. But I think when you really look at it, and now that he's gone, you can kind of think, you can kind of ponder on things. We were just excited to be in the movement. We didn't even know where we were going. And that's problematic. And that's one of our shortcomings. That is definitely one of our shortcomings. We were so blinded by what we wanted that we couldn't even really see what it actually was. Now, if you listen to what he said, you'll definitely see. I want to say that he had good intentions. I really do believe that he had good intentions. But if we were just being honest, this was nothing but a leg up for him. It was a stepping stool. He wasn't here for the movement long term. I mean, as we can see, he left after 3 years. So our biggest thing was we didn't even know where we were going as far as the movement is concerned. So there's blame on both sides. But again, if you compare that to what you've seen in Black Panther, and I mean, obviously we know, I'm just using Black Panther as a symbolist because HBCUs are Wakanda. HBCUs where we are primarily. Yes, we are on campuses at PWIs across the country. We definitely are. But HBCUs are our Wakanda. So that's why I use Wakanda as a semblance for this episode. But just again, just any movement that this country has had that you can study, what I've just explained to you along these lines is kind of like the rise and fall in each movement. But the difference is the movement is going to keep going. The movement will continue. Excuse me, like Nipsey Hussle says, right? The marathon will continue. The movement will continue. Now that we've seen this movement, right? We've seen where we could go, what we could be, but now we've seen that. I think I can say we've seen that at not a drop of a dime per se, but on the fly. We've seen this on the fly. This movement was on the fly. Again, we did not have any clue what this movement was going to be. We were just along for the ride. Now, again, the movement will continue, but now we need to make sure we incorporate a plan so that this movement will continue to press forward, that these guys will continue to choose HBCUs, no matter the fact that they do have Power 5 offers, which a lot of them are. But a really good thing that we will learn, that I think that everyone is learning about this movement, is just how quick we were in just going along for the ride without a plan. We just living recklessly. This movement was reckless in a good way, though. Reckless in a good way. So now we need to take what we've learned in order to keep the movement going forward. And I think that's very important. I think we now have a blueprint. We've seen it. Now we need to overhaul some things. Now we need to tweak some things in order to make sure that this renaissance keeps going. Again, there are some turbulent times. There are going to be some turbulent times. A leader is going to leave. The colonizers are going to come and attempt to take that leader away. They're going to dangle something in that leader's face. Again, if you're familiar with COINTELPRO, they're going to plant someone who looks like you inside of a movement to take you away. Again, I want y'all, when y'all hear this, and even if you see this on YouTube, I really want you to go and look at any movement that this country has ever seen. I mean, obviously, the most simplest one that you'll probably think of is the civil rights movement, right? You can do that. And you'll see everything that I'm talking about right now. It might not align, just the pieces of the puzzle just might not just fall into it, you know what I'm saying, just like that. But everything that I'm saying right now, if you go and study any movement that this country's ever had, you'll see that embedded within the movement. So now that we know what the movement looks like, how can we improve the movement? And I think one of the things that's really getting done right now is that there are people with plans trying to affect the movement in a positive way. So, Wakanda Forever, Black Panther. HBCUs are Wakanda. Wakanda has to be nurtured, though. And that just goes along with a plan, like I just spoke about. Wakanda has to be nurtured. You can't just try to put a band-aid on issues and, and just think that they just gonna go away like that. This movement has to be nurtured. Yeah, we had a prominent figure, we had a prominent face at the top of that movement, but that figure is gone. The good thing about the movement, though, is that it just isn't based simply on one person. We all play a part in elevating and uplifting this movement. What's your part? My part? I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist since I was 18 years old. So my part in the movement is telling our story. Our story means telling Black stories. That's my part in the movement. My part of the movement is to make sure that we aren't brushed with a fine tooth comb, that we aren't just placed, we aren't just defined by what they've seen over these last 3 years. We are defined by that. What we are defined by is the history of our institutions, the blood, sweat, and tears that our ancestors put in order to build these institutions, in order to make a way for them to learn, but also for us to learn and continue to grow. Our ancestors weren't just thinking about themselves, they were thinking about us when they decided to create HBCUs. They were thinking about us. They weren't thinking about themselves. So now what we have to do, we have to put a plan in place to nurture this movement. But everyone has a specific role to play. I gave you my role, and I'm going to do my role to the best of my abilities. I'm going to tell these Black stories. That's my role. I am going to put out accurate depictions of what our institutions are, what the guys who go to our institutions are, what the guys who go to predominantly white institutions, and then they might come home to HBCU. You want to talk to them. You want to learn from them. You want to know what they experience at these institutions in order to make their experiences at an HBCU better. You want to retain those type of kids because those kids chose you for a reason. And one of the, again, there's so many misnomers out there. It's not always about academics and things like that. Some people actually want to be around people who look like them. If you know the history of HBCUs, you also know that we are the leading producers of doctors, lawyers, all those types of things across the country. Everyone isn't going to be a professional athlete, but you can be a professional. And HBCUs will nurture that. So my overall goal for this particular episode, this particular show, was to provide some comparisons and contrasts. Well, not contrasts, comparisons between Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and HBCUs. And I hope you all come away with a pretty good depiction of the picture that I was trying to paint and, just everything that goes along with it. This movement is not over. This movement is just beginning. And the good thing about this movement just beginning is the fact that we failed in some areas. We absolutely failed in some areas. But can you imagine how much stronger we're going to be now that we know the areas that we failed in? Now that we're putting active plans in place in order to keep our institutions moving forward. For an example, I just saw a story. It might have been an HBCU game day about 4 Black conferences are going to start working together. That's huge, man. That is huge. I was reading a piece by William C. Roden in Anscape where there was a coach, former head coach at Morgan State, but he's now like an NFL, like assistant coach somewhere along the lines. And what he was saying was that the future of HBCU football, is dependent upon the presidents at these universities and what they want it to be. Now, what you also must understand is this isn't just about football, but football is the economic driver at institutions across the country, not just HBCUs, but across the country. But one of the things that we do at HBCUs, as we should, there's a greater priority placed on education. But the money that can come in, that football will help support these institutions, is invaluable. And most importantly, it's going to keep your doors open at your HBCU. So you cannot avoid what football means to historically black colleges and universities. Now we have a plan. Now there is a course of action that's starting to take place and starting to take shape. HBCUs are going to be in a better position because of this exit. The Harlem Renaissance didn't last long, but it was fruitful. And again, there were so many different things going on during those times of the 20s, 1920s, where hey Diamond, I got some people coming in. How you doing, Diamond? So when you think about the Harlem Renaissance did not last long, right? But what it did, I mean, obviously there were other things going on, discrimination, slavery, still those things were still happening, still taking place. You think about Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you really think about it, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street was really one of the first black movements that we had in this country. But again, people are going to, when they don't have direct access to your resources, they are going to do whatever they can to take those resources from you. Hence Black Panther, hence this recent coaching exodus at Jackson State University. Happy New Year to you too, Diamond. I appreciate you tapping in with me. So yeah, it's good to have some faces on here. I appreciate it. So yeah. So this isn't a moment. This is definitely a movement, but it becomes a movement based on how we continue to advance, how we learn from our mistakes, how we grow from our mistakes, how we take what we've learned and grow from the mistakes and then implement it in order to make things better. This thing isn't just about the last 3 years. Not at all. Really, it's about the next 10 and what's going to be done in order to lead our HBCUs into, what it's going to be or what they are going to be within the next 10 years. And I am really looking forward to seeing how this progresses over the next few years. Recruiting hasn't stopped. Guys are really seeing that there are other avenues to achieve their dreams. One of the biggest proponents of HBCUs right now is Fayetteville State's Joshua Williams, who's I believe he's starting for the Kansas City Chiefs right now. Obviously, you look at James Houston and what he's doing. James Houston from Jackson State. You look at him and you see what he's doing. He's tearing the NFL up right now. I can't think of the Ja'Tari Carter. I don't know if he's starting for the Chicago Bears offensive line, but I definitely think that he's making a huge impact on that organization in just his first year. So there are viable avenues to achieving our dreams. There isn't just one specific way. There isn't one specific person that's going to lead us to our dream either. It's dependent upon what we learn and what we implement. I appreciate you. Hopefully you all take something away from the Black Panther Wakanda comparison that I made as far as HBCUs are concerned. Yeah, all we need is an opportunity. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And as you see, when we get the opportunity, we definitely make the most of it for sure. That's one thing that we are absolutely good at, Diamond. So I appreciate you saying that. Definitely appreciate you saying that. So yeah, this isn't a moment. It's a movement. This has been another episode of the Sip My Thoughts podcast. Again, thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Again, if you just look at the tick on the bottom of the screen, I'm on all social media platforms at Sip My Thoughts. YouTube, Sip My Thoughts. I'm definitely trying to grow my subscriber base on YouTube this year. That's one of my dreams. I'm hoping to get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube this year. We as a fan base have absolutely definitely got to stay engaged. I feel like the fan base is really doing a really good job of it also, though, Diamond. I really do. Everyone is engaged. Everyone is talking to the recruits on from what I've seen on Twitter. everyone is really doing a good job of that. And I think I want to leave us I want to leave this conversation with let me find Aubrey Miller's post from yesterday because I thought that was so powerful. I thought it was so powerful. I'll start here. Hold on. See what Mr. Aubrey Miller got to say. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. PWIs make you fat. HBCUs make you hungry. I like that. I love that, as a matter of fact. PWIs make you fat. HBCUs make you hungry. And again, this isn't just about football. This is in all facets of life. Again, everyone isn't going to play professional football. But everyone can be a professional. PWIs make you fat. HBCUs make you hungry. Amen. Amen. But yeah, again, this is a movement, not a moment. Movement over moment. Movement over moment. Again, thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you for listening. This has been another episode of the Sip My Thoughts podcast. Please follow me on all social media platforms, all streaming platforms, audio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. You can find me everywhere. Again, I'm on YouTube also. This episode will be available on YouTube. Also, I'm streaming it actually through StreamYard. So you guys can find it on my YouTube channel as well, which is Sip My Thoughts. Definitely tap in with me. Let me know what you think about this episode once you go back and listen. And definitely leave a comment. Diamond, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming in and leaving me a comment. I really do appreciate it. I hope to see you on here more. Maximize each moment of the movement. Amen. Amen. Thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Again, it's been your boy, Sip My Thoughts. Until next time.